Friendship is not a word that is easily described. In fact, those who know the true meaning of it are scarce. It usually comes with a bond of trust that is not easily broken. The question is, can you believe in that bond till the very end, no matter what? My name is Sophie. I'm 21 years old. I used to live with my parents and my two siblings, Lena and Brian. Dad's an architect. Mom's a doctor. But she had to leave her job to take care of Brian and Lena because they were young and still needed her care and attention. And for a long time, so did I. As a kid, my parents were always worried about me. I didn't have any friends at school, and I was very shy. I would immediately cry when something happened, but all that changed when I met my guardian angel, Matilda. The way we met was somewhat bizarre. I did pretty well in my studies at school. I had hobbies like art and music. Unfortunately, there was this one group of girls who liked to bully people like me. One day, in science class, I was carrying a project I was working on when those girls stopped me and tried to take my project. Just when I was about to cry and let them steal it from me, a girl appeared and told them to leave me alone, or else they would have to deal with her. When they saw her, they looked frightened and left in a hurry. I didn't know the girl, but when I turned to look at her, I saw that she was a tall brunette with a beautiful smile. She took my project and held it for me because I was shaking and sobbing. Then she walked me to class and told me she would be back during break to check on me. As she was leaving, she called back to me and shouted that her name was Matilda and said that she would see me later. She did indeed come back during break. The clique of bully girls left me alone after that and kept their distance from Matilda as well. I asked Matilda why they were so afraid of her. She laughed and said it was a long story, but the short version was that she beat them up once, and they became afraid of her and stayed clear ever since. I asked her how she knew that those girls were always bothering me. She said it was pure coincidence, that she had happened to be in the classroom the day they tried to take my project from me. She said that I looked so helpless that she decided to step in. I asked her to be my friend. She teared up a little and said, "Of course," and from that day forward, we became the best of friends. I was cheerful every day now, and we grew closer and closer together. The happiest days of my life. Her story was unusual. Her dad was a boxer. Her parents split up because her mom couldn't stand the thought of him risking his life boxing every day, so she left. Her dad did his best to look after Maddie and her two little sisters. Then, one day, he was killed by thieves who robbed him as he was coming home from work, leaving Maddie to raise her siblings alone. This heavy responsibility matured her and toughened her character. She taught me to be bold, to love adventures. I feared nothing with her there. I dealt with situations decisively, without hesitation. We were like two separate halves of a ship sailing in the dark that happened to find each other one night and came together to complete each other. This was how I met Maddie, and our friendship grew stronger year after year. Maddie and her sisters were like my own sisters. We were all one big happy family, until something happened that disturbed the fabric of our universe. I enrolled in the College of Engineering, while she enrolled in a different college. The first year of college was difficult for me, because I missed Maddie so much. But then I tried really hard and focused on my studies. In my third year, I met Matthew, a player on the college basketball team. During that time, I was working for the college newspaper, and I was assigned to interview him. He was smart, handsome, and had an inspiring story. His parents died when he was young, leaving him responsible for his younger brother, so he decided to work and earn money while pursuing his dream of being a basketball player. By the time we met, he had a chance to play in the NBA. We had a connection, and he proposed to me. I wanted to tell Maddie so badly, to share this wonderful news with her, but I couldn't. Maddie had completely disappeared that year, and I hadn't seen her at all. I didn't know where she was or how to reach her. Then, one day, I got a call from her. Her voice sounded distressed, maybe because her responsibilities were such a burden on her. Either way, I was glad she called. She seemed sad, and I asked her what I could do to help. I told her that I wanted to see her, so we could catch up. She agreed, and told me that we needed to get together soon. When we finally met, I saw that she had lost a lot of weight. I asked her why, and she replied that she was working while going to college. She wasn't looking after herself at all, but her eyes told another story. I told her about Matthew, and that we were getting married soon. She smiled, but her joy seemed affected somehow. I didn't know how to describe it. Perhaps it was the disconnected look in her eyes. I wanted to introduce her to Matthew, but apparently they had already met. They spoke politely to each other, but there seemed to be something between them that made us all feel uncomfortable. I didn't know what it was. A while later, Matthew was always nervous about something. He always seemed to be busy with training or games. But was that all there was? At the same time, Maddie had started acting weird as well. Something was going on between them, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Whenever her phone rang, Maddie wouldn't answer, or even look to see who was calling. Shortly before my wedding, Maddie had disappeared again without notice. Matthew went back to his normal self, and everything seemed to be fine. The wedding ceremony was going beautifully, until we got to the part where the preacher said, "Anyone who saw a reason why this marriage should not take place, may they speak now or forever hold their peace." Well, it turned out that there was someone who saw a reason why this marriage should not take place, and that someone did speak up. And much to my amazement, it was Maddie. She shouted that Matthew was her fiancé, and that he had deceived her and left her for me. Matthew looked at her with a perplexed look on his face, as if this was news to him. I felt like time had shifted into slow motion. I had to be dreaming. I couldn't imagine why neither of them told me this before. I looked at Maddie and asked if it was true. She said, "I'm done lying to you. I don't want to act anymore. Meeting you has been the most horrible thing that has ever happened to me. My life was going well till I met you. You got everything you wanted, even Matthew. He chose you instead." I was staring, lost for words. Tears started running down my face. "Please leave," I said quietly. Maddie was crying too, yet she smiled and walked away. I didn't understand her behavior. Why did she smile as she walked out of my life? Days later, the answer revealed itself. Matthew and I knew each other well, and what happened at the wedding did not affect us at all. Still, I could see it in Matthew's eyes. He had something to tell me, and one day, he came inside the house with tears in his eyes. I asked what was wrong, if his family was okay. He nodded and said, "They're all fine, Sophie, but there's something I've been wanting to tell you." During those times, when Maddie disappeared without warning, it was because she kept a secret from you. She had a terminal disease. She was dying. I was shocked. He continued and said that she had arranged the scene at the wedding to make me hate her, so that when she died, I wouldn't feel grief or sorrow, that she had loved me so much. Soon after our wedding day, her disease took a turn for the worst, and she died. I was still standing in shock. He gave me the letter she wrote me. "Dear Sophie, I'm sure that up to this point in time, you didn't understand my strange behavior, my sudden change. It was necessary to protect you from the shock of my death. I had no choice but to make you hate me. Don't be upset with me, dear Sophie. These are the last moments in my life, and I just wanted to tell you that I love you. Forever friends, Matilda." I cried like I never did before. I had lost my best friend. Dear Maddie, now I know the reason for your tearful smile when you left the wedding that day. You are still my one true friend. Not a moment has passed without thinking of you. Forgive me for not being there when you needed me most. You will always be in my heart. Every one of us has a talent. It may be singing beautifully, drawing artistically, writing poetically. We're all different. Our special talents make us happy. We are all unique in our own way, living in a world full of peace, love, and happiness. But what if our talent became our bane? Well, my talent did become my bane. Let me tell you how. My name is Jenny, and I'm 16 years old. I lived in a quiet neighborhood with my parents and my little brother Matthew. I didn't have a lot of friends or hobbies. I was only interested in social media, but I always had a feeling that I had something unique, something that distinguished me from others. Turned out I was right. It all started on my grandmother's birthday. My family and I were traveling to her home to celebrate the occasion. The road was narrow and bumpy, with a rocky shoulder on one side and a river on the other. Dad was driving too fast, so obviously, Mom was a bit worried. Conversely, Matthew was excited. It was raining so hard that day that Dad feared the weather might get even worse, so he was driving faster than he should have, to try to arrive at Grandma's house quickly. I was worried too, but for a slightly different reason. I had a feeling of impending doom on that trip. The rain got progressively worse. There was almost continuous lightning and thunder. Suddenly, we saw a big truck that had stopped on the road ahead of us. Mom screamed. Dad swerved to avoid hitting the truck and lost control of the car, which had gone on one of its sides and off the road into the river. It was the most frightening situation I had ever experienced in my whole life. We went underwater, and I felt as if we were in an aquarium. Dad was unconscious, and his forehead was bleeding. Mom was struggling, and Matthew was paralyzed with fear, his eyes tightly shut. Then, my vision went dark. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital bed, with a team of doctors around me. When I asked them about my family, the look on their faces told me that I was the sole survivor of that horrible accident. Several days had passed since the accident. I was having trouble sleeping. The doctors gave me some sleeping pills. They even tried hypnosis to help me sleep. Grandma came to visit me. She was very sad. She said I could come live with her. My whole life was turned upside down in an instant. A police officer at the hospital was kind enough to drive Grandma and I to her home. After he dropped us off, something strange happened. In a fraction of a second, I had a vision, a momentary premonition that something bad was going to happen to him. I saw him trying to catch a thief and suddenly crashing into another car. So I thanked him for the ride and told him to take care of himself, to be very careful. He smiled and said that he will. The very next day, as I was watching the news, I saw a report that that very same kind officer had died in a car crash, just like my premonition. Grandma was upset when I told her what had happened. I didn't tell her that I had foreseen his death, because I knew that she wouldn't believe me. In fact, she might have even thought I was crazy. This strange turn of events happened again, with one of our neighbors, who visited us one day. She was a kind, lovely woman. I had a premonition that she would die in her kitchen due to a gas line explosion. I urged her to be careful with the cooking gas, because it could be so dangerous. But she just laughed and said that she loved cooking, and that there's nothing to fear. Grandma got a bit upset with me for making a big deal out of nothing. She said that I was just a little paranoid due to the accident, and that my imagination was getting way too overactive, and that I shouldn't try to scare people. Needless to say, the neighbor that I had warned did indeed die in a gas line explosion 4 days later. Coincidence? I think not. Am I somehow causing these incidents to happen? I couldn't help but think that I was somehow linked to the whole thing. I searched the internet for any information about this phenomena, and I found that it was common in people who had been involved in a traumatic experience, especially almost drowning incidents. I read a research that said that parts of the subject's brain would become very active. After our neighbor's accident, my aunt and uncle came to visit us. I had missed them a lot, but yet again, I had a premonition that they would have an accident going home, causing their car to explode and crash into the river. 2 days later, they were preparing to leave and head home. I begged them to stay one more night, but they said that they couldn't because they had work the next day. I told Grandma about my premonition, and she scolded me, told me to stop this nonsense. She thought it was my overactive imagination again. My uncle came in as Grandma was scolding me and asked me what was wrong. I wanted to say, "Nothing important, Uncle. Just premonitions of doom, that's all." But I didn't. I went to sleep instead and had a dream that Uncle was going to get run over by a car. Suddenly, I woke up to the sound of Uncle and Grandma's voices. They were talking about me, and it was raining outside. Uncle stood up and said that he had to get something from his car. I sat up straight and shouted, "No, don't go." Uncle said, "Jenny, it'll be fine. I'll just get something from the car." I couldn't dissuade him from going, so I followed him out. Uncle went out to his car and was standing by its door, which was facing the road. Then I saw the headlights. A car was coming down the road, driving towards us. I saw the car hit a flooded spot on the road and suddenly began sliding sideways, right towards Uncle. Instinctively, I made a decision to try and protect him. I had to at least try. I jumped in front of the swerving car. The driver saw me and tried to regain control. Suddenly, I felt a warm sunshine mysteriously coming down from the sky amidst the rain, and I felt calm and safe. And I had one final premonition before everything went dark.